Hi, I'm making a response to an old video that's about probably a year old or several months old. What is spiritual marriage? What Doug Perry believes. I recall Doug had a video a while back about wedding vows that I responded to about the idea that it's wrong to make a vow, so you shouldn't make wedding vows. And I responded that wedding vows aren't really oaths, that you're just saying I do, which is the same as saying yay or nay, uh, more or less in what Jesus said. Now, when it comes to marriage and weddings, Doug says that if you're married, it says, and it is strictly for companionship, for intimacy, for convenience, because he's got money, because he was hot, and there is no spiritual connectivity really between you, then you're just shacking up. And you need to immediately repent for shacking up and ask the Lord what to do to put your marriage in divine order. So that's what Doug was saying in the video. Um, the thing is, I can't find that idea in the Bible at all. What I see about marriage, it says that two shall become one flesh. It says that if a man is married to his wife, he's one with her in body. It doesn't say he's one with her in spirit. It doesn't say that he'll be with her eternally. But we do see that marriage is a type of the spiritual union between Christ and the church. It says that, talking about marriage in 1 Corinthians 6, Paul talks about being one with the Lord in spirit. He talks about the marriage, quotes from Adam and Eve, two shall be one flesh, and writes that this is a mystery about Christ and the church in Ephesians. So we see that there is it's a type of a spiritual union, but the Bible doesn't teach that marriage on the earth is a spiritual union between the husband and wife. Now, if we're both believers, it's pretty pitiful if there's no spiritual connection between two believers who spend all their time together. And sure, yeah, if you don't have any spiritual connection with your wife, you probably need to repent. You're probably not praying together. You're probably not spending any time in the Word together, and it's not a healthy thing. So, yeah, sure, you need to repent, but that doesn't mean you're shacking up like Doug said you're shacking up if you get married because the other person's hot or whatever. What do we know in the Bible about marriage? Jesus said some things about marriage, and Paul wrote some things about marriage. He got some commandments from the Lord about it. One of the things that Paul wrote about marriage was in response to the Corinthians, and he said that to prevent fornication, it's good for every man to have his own, every woman to have her own husband, and every man to have his own wife. And the wife's body doesn't belong to her, or the wife's body belongs to the husband, and the husband's body belongs to the wife. So, if two Christians are burning, Paul says it's better to marry than to burn. If they're burning and they're, both believers, they're not married to anybody else, they're not connected to anybody else in that way, and they want to get married, Paul says that if he says to a man in a certain group, but anyway, he says if you marry, you have not sinned. And the virgin marries, if the virgin marries, she has not sinned. So how can we condemn people who get married, even if there's some physical, if they do it for some physical reasons? Now, that's not the most spiritual thing in the world, just to get married because of the physical reasons, and I certainly wouldn't encourage that. But it doesn't mean they're shacking up. It doesn't mean that their marriage isn't valid in the sight of God, or not that Doug said that in this most previous video, but it's maybe it's not, it might be a bit carnal, and maybe they do need to repent, but it doesn't mean they're not married. It doesn't mean they're just shacking up. Now, Paul says it's better to marry than to burn, and some people think of just a sexual lust when they read burn, and I notice the other place that occurs in the Bible is when Paul says, who has not sinned and I did not burn. So burning is an inward emotional thing. I suspect it includes, both the sexual urges, and may also include some emotional urges, like when somebody goes to the mall and they see everybody else paired up and they're thinking, when am I going to find somebody to spend my life with? And am I going to be alone forever? And, maybe that's burning too, even if it's not directly sexual. So anyway, back to the topic of spiritual, or of marriage. No, not every generation doesn't have to discover what marriage is and get a revelation from God that's completely new. We've got the Bible. God's already revealed things, and God speaks to us through the Bible. And we're supposed to hold to the faith that was once delivered to the saints, and believe it. Jesus gave some revelation on marriage. He said that if a man divorces his wife, except it be for fornication, and marries another, he commits adultery. So, and he that marries her that is divorced commits adultery. So Jesus gave some revelation on marriage, and we need to listen to that as well. He tells the Lord communicated to Paul. He said to let not the wife depart from her husband, and let not the husband put away his wife. And he says about the wives that, but if she depart, let her remain unmarried or be reconciled to her husband. So we've got some revelation about marriage. But as far as the idea that in Doug's earlier video about the idea that God has to tell you for you to be married or for it to be right, or that the idea that people get married by God telling them, this is your rib, or this is your husband, this is your wife. God can do that. God can send an angel before. God can do like he did with Rebekah when, the Lord showed who Isaac was supposed to marry to the servant of Abraham who went to go get a wife and bring her back. So it's kind of an arranged marriage. The woman was just going to be brought to Isaac. He didn't pick her out. We don't see where Isaac heard God saying, this is going to be the woman, but rather Abraham entrusted the servant to go get the woman, bring her back, and the servant had prayed for something. The sign happened. He got this woman. It was from Abraham's kin, which is what Abraham wanted. Brought the woman back, and Isaac loved her. So that's not a case of Isaac here. Oh, God told me to marry this woman. God can do that. In my own case, I met my wife. I went home. I wonder if this is the woman God wants me to marry. I remember praying that. My wife wrote in her prayer journal. She was thinking along the same lines, and I just prayed about it, and it felt like the Lord was telling me for us to get married, but there were obstacles and some people who didn't agree with it, and I would have loved to have a prophecy or something to confirm it, but by the I kept praying about it, and I just finally decided, got some advice on decision making for some other brothers, and I just finally said, Lord, this is the woman I believe you want to marry. This is why. Bam, bam, bam. Here are the reasons. I'm going to go ask her to marry me. If you don't want me to do it, stop me or tell me to quit. I'm just going to go do it. And I had, before maybe I was 95, 99% sure. After that, I felt complete peace about it, and I knew this was what I needed to do. And then after I was already at peace about it, then somebody gives us a prophecy that we're going to go all over or go to many places, minister to many people, and words like that kind of implied we were going to be together for a long time, which is encouragement and strengthened us. So anyway, I certainly believe in God directing people, and I would advise people to pray and ask the Lord to direct them to who to marry. But I wouldn't say that someone has sinned if that's how they found another person, or even say that that's the normative thing, is that the way you're married is God tells you that's the one. Yeah, I mean, God can do that, but I'm not going to impose something. Jesus didn't say, oh yeah, new revelation. Previously, marriage was arranged by arranged marriages, but now you're all supposed to just like choose your spouse by God telling you who to marry. I mean, Jesus. I mean, we got four gospels here, and there's plenty of space for Jesus to have said that in, but he didn't say it. If he did, it's not in the Bible to be communicated to all the church. So why do we have to believe that, or why do we want to impose that on people, or put them under a guilt trip if that's not the way they got married, or So another thing is being uptight about marriage certificates. Doug argues that if you get a marriage certificate, you're giving up the rights to your marriage to the state, that there's like a triangle with the state on top and it's a contract between three people, and that you're giving up the rights to your kids. Well, I don't see any legal reason. I'm no legal expert at all. I don't know of any legal reason to believe that, and I didn't notice any in the video that I saw, the other video from Doug that I saw, any reason to think that that's the case. If a single mother has a child, and they start showing, they make all the kids go in the school, go watch the sex education video that says homosexuality is okay. Are they going to exempt the single mother? She doesn't have a marriage certificate. Doesn't the state claim her kid just like it would claim the kid of somebody with a marriage certificate? I don't see how a marriage certificate gives the state any more rights over your kid. The certificate I didn't sign one in the U.S., so I didn't go through the U.S. system. But the certificates people sign in this country don't give up any rights like that. As far as I know, I just looked up a certificate online. It just certifies that so-and-so were joined in holy matrimony. And yeah, so I don't see any. There are 50 states. There's 50 sets of laws, and this is all the territories in the U.S. I don't know enough about it, but I can understand the arguments against a 501c3 church organization. I could see how the government uses that to keep churches from talking about politics, if that's what the church wants to talk about, and how that they could use it possibly to try to force religious organizations to hire homosexuals or not to discriminate in the future. I could see that happening, and churches losing their buildings. So I can see why you wouldn't want to be a 501c3. But marriage certificates, I mean, it's a conscience issue probably, but uh, a lot of people perceive that if you say we're married but we don't have a marriage certificate, they perceive that we're common law married, for example. They would perceive that as, oh, you fornicated for 6 months or 2 weeks or whatever, and you fornicated until you were legally considered married. It's a stigma. It doesn't look good. The Bible says to provide things honest in the sight of all men. There's certain things Christians should do so that the way of truth not be spoken evil of. And the wedding certificate, there's certain ways we do things in society. It gives value to the other person that you're saying we're married. And even though, and of course, the wedding ceremony, it does the same thing. You know, what's wrong if it's not compromising, if it's not idolatry? Why not get married in a way that other people in society acknowledge you as married? I mean, why do you have to do it in a way where people who are kind of fornicators would do it to get married, or the people who are the stereotypical way that the person who would like try not to be legally married so that he could run off with the next woman would do it. You know why? And especially in a society with all the shacking up that goes on, where people don't want to be married and they just want to fornicate for a while until the next one comes along, or until they break up. So why? And you know, Jesus said to the woman at the well that you've well said, I have 5 husbands, and he whom thou now hast is not thy husband. So she wasn't married to him according to custom. She was just, you know, with the guy. So there's some distinction in Jesus' day. Why don't we do things in the most honorable way? You know, maybe you got a conscience issue over the marriage license. I just don't see any basis for it, and I certainly see a lot more reasons for getting married in a way that other people acknowledge. Now, you know, the Quakers had developed their own marriage practices. They had a religious reason for doing it. I mean, they felt like they'd be compromising their faith if they went to the Church of England to get their marriages done, and that was the legal way to do it back when they developed their marriage ceremony. So what they did is I think William Penn or his dad or something like that got married the Quaker way. They just had a meeting where one acknowledged the other as husband and wife. The community acknowledged it. They all signed us. They all, and nowadays I think they all sign a certificate if they're the kind of old-fashioned Quakers. You know, and if you if you don't want to have a clergy-led marriage ceremony, you could have someone else lead it, or you could have a couple of elders pronounce a blessing, or everybody in the congregation pronounce a blessing and acknowledgement of the marriage. You know, I don't see the Western Book of Common Prayer marriage in the Bible. I don't think they got married that way. In the Old Testament, you know, the law that God gave indicates that the father gives the daughter away, gets a bride price for his virgin daughter, gives the daughter away in marriage to the man. There's a feast. That's all I can see. In the case of marrying a widow in a Lavrite marriage, where a close relative took over the property and the widow of another relative, we see in the book of Ruth. Boaz called in some elders of the city. They did a legal contract or some legal agreement to buy some land, and he says, you know, you're witnessing, I'm also taking Ruth as my wife. So he did that before witnesses. He did it before the community. He did it in a socially acceptable way. And I certainly don't see why having a marriage certificate is bad, or how it's surrendering any rights. You're not making any agreements, and the state's going to try to exert rights over your kids anyway. So we're going to have to deal with that. I don't see how you're losing any ground by doing a marriage certificate. Again, I'm not a legal expert, so, you know, don't take my legal advice from me, but you know, that's my opinion on that issue. And as far as wedding ceremonies go, why not acknowledge your bride? I mean, don't they all dream about having on the white dress and doing the marriage ceremony? You know, so why not acknowledge your bride publicly before other people? I don't believe Doug touched on that in the and I think he did some kind of wedding ceremony in some video I saw when I was doing a little research to make mine. So anyway, those are some of the ideas. when you get married, do it in a way that's acceptable before men, so the way of truth not be evil spoken of, and in a way that acknowledges and honors your bride or groom. God bless you.